Welcome, everybody, to the initial podcast of EMBARGOED, which is a podcast that we're launching, and that's going to cover economic sanctions, export controls, and all things international trade. My name is Brian Fleming. I'm here with my friend, colleague, and co-host, Mr. Tim O'Toole. What's up, Tim?
Hey, Brian. How's it going? Hey, everybody out there in podcast land. Good to be talking to you about embargoes and sanctions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, indeed. Things are very good. We're very excited to get this off the ground, and so we just wanted to talk to you today, just for a couple minutes, just to let you know who we are, what this is all about, and what we're hoping to do here as we get this podcast started. So for all you trade nerds out there, obviously you'll recognize embargoed as a term that we hear a lot in the sanctions context, and so we do what we intend with this podcast is to we do want to get into the weeds a bit on what's going on in the world of sanctions, export controls, and trade, as we said. But we're really hoping, above all else, that this is going to be something that is going to appeal to trade nerds like us, people who think about this stuff and talk about this stuff all the time, and hopefully be something that's interesting and useful and helpful to others out there who are just curious about this, because these are topics that are coming at us fast and furious in the news every day.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about sanctions, is that it's really hard to talk about foreign policy, particularly in the last few years, without some discussion of sanctions. So if Russia invades Ukraine or Crimea, there's often a sanctions policy that has gone into place to try and deter it. And we can talk about the policy behind the sanctions policy and what it means and what the sanctions do and what they don't do, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. But, pretty much every story in foreign policy in the media nowadays, so if it's Cuba, if it's Venezuela, if it's Syria, if it's Iran, if it's North Korea, there's going to be a sanctions component, and there's often going to be a trade or export controls component as well. And so we can talk about it on a high level, like what's the policy behind those sanctions, or what's the policy behind that export control requirement. But we can talk about it on a more technical level too, because sometimes the technical questions can be interesting. I mean, we're going to try and talk about this in a way that makes sense and can talk about it in a way that real people who aren't lawyers can understand. But on the other hand, sometimes you can't understand what is going on without understanding the technical.
Exactly. So, and just to let you know a little bit about us, Tim and I are both attorneys. Obviously, we're both trade lawyers. We're both partners at the law firm Miller and Chevalier here in Washington, D.C. And we are not here to give you legal advice. Disclaimer that our malpractice providers require us to give. No legal advice. We're here to give opinion and thoughts and sort of decode and demystify some of this stuff, so that hopefully to folks listening at home or in your cars or wherever you are, that you might walk away and say, oh, I hadn't thought of that, or that's an interesting take on that, or I might need to look into that further, or let me think about how that might affect my business, et cetera. So that's really what we're after here, is to have some above all else, engaging, interesting, and not boring discussion on these topics. We don't think they're boring, obviously, because we talk about this stuff and think about it all the time. But to Tim's point, it is tricky stuff. It's dense. It can be hard to get right. And given the pace that this current administration uses these tools, there's always something. There's literally every day there's something new, and so it's hard to keep up. So honestly, we're going to hopefully be here for our audience to keep everybody abreast of sort of what the latest and the greatest is, and or things that just kind of pique our interest, and share that with everybody.
No, we'll talk about hopefully what's on people's minds, and if we don't, we're going to be reachable by email, reachable through social media, and so we'll also be talking about things that are on other people's minds, and so we hope that this is a dialogue not just between Brian and me, which is the sort of dialogue that we have all the time anyway, but also a dialogue with you all out there who may have questions about this issue, and we will do our best to try and answer some of those questions on our podcast, and also maybe put together segments where we just answer questions.
Yeah, mailbag.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just one last parting thought here at the outset, but we're also really mindful of the fact that I think this area of the law and policy generally gets a little bit of a bad rap for being a little wonky, a little, sort of ivory towerish and a little elitist, and we want to try our best to dispel that. We try to do that all the time when we talk to our clients. We try to keep things in terms and explain things in ways that business folks and others who don't do this stuff every day can really understand and use. And my background is I'm a former government lawyer who did this work in government. Tim's background is white collar defense, and so I think we have some real perspective on how this stuff affects people and both the inside and the outside. And so that's something that we certainly strive to do when we talk about and think about these issues. And so hopefully you'll get a little sample of that as well as we go through the pod.
Yeah, I mean, our backgrounds are pretty helpful to this because for us, this is about real people and real consequences and liberty and big fines. And so sometimes when you think about these issues, you look at the regulations and you think they're just these technical regulations, and the goal is to memorize the regulations. And that's really not our background at all. We come from a place where we're defending people, defending companies, and we understand their real consequences. And I think one of the things that we want to make sure is part of this discussion are the real consequences for real people that these have. And that's why I think as a matter of just kind of common sense and plain talk, hopefully we can get to the bottom of some of these issues and help people understand what's at stake in all of these sorts of trades issues.
Yes, well said. And so with that, I think, again, we're very excited to be getting our Embargoed off the ground. Looking forward to hearing from folks as people are being exposed to the podcast. And please, we welcome that feedback. And without further ado, I think we'll dive right in.